This week's Parsha is Parshas Vayeira. Parshas Vayeira at the end discusses Akedas Yitzchak, the binding of Isaac. That is when God commanded Abraham to sacrifice his very own son, Yitzchak. In Abraham's eyes, the only person who was going to fulfill his legacy, carry out the destiny of the Jewish people, would be Yitzchak. And that's the way it actually occurred. That Yitzchak had Yaakov, who in turn had the 12 tribes. From there became the Jewish people. Without Yitzchak, there would be no future for the Jewish people. Nonetheless, Abraham is willing and excited to perform the commandment of God, to do the will of God, to sacrifice his own son. And at first glance, this would seem to be an act of vulgarity, barbaric worship of a deity, to go and sacrifice your own son. In fact, one of the most severe sins in the Torah is the act of melech, of idol worship, where they passed their children through a wall of fire, and many times the children would die. And in the verse it says that act of worship is considered grotesque. And for some reason here, Abraham is praised for his act in performing God's will when he is told to sacrifice his own son. Not that this is actually a question, because if God tells you to do something, no matter how vulgar it may seem, still it's God's will. But just to illustrate that this act was only performed, or Abraham was only excited to do it because it was God's will. So the wording used by the Akedas Yitzchak is Vayashkem Avram B'Boker. Initially it says when Avram set out to do what Hashem asked him to sacrifice his own son, it says that Avram got up in the morning. The commentators explain that Vayashkem, he arose in the morning, means that he couldn't sleep the entire night. He was so excited to perform the mitzvah. Now sometimes people may misconstrue this to say that Abraham's worship of God was barbaric. God forbid. If you look, it says that by the annihilation of Sodom and Gomorrah, God decided to destroy the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. And at that time, it says also, Vayashkem Avram B'Boker, that Avram got up in the morning. He arose in the morning, meaning he couldn't sleep. Why couldn't he sleep? He couldn't sleep because he knew, he was told by the angels that they were going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. Therefore, Avram arose in the morning. He couldn't sleep at night, and he arose in the morning to daven to Hashem, to pray to God, to beseech for the mercy and the saving of the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. So this is the way we can see the entire picture of what Abraham was. Abraham was the paragon of kindness. To destroy, to kill, to sacrifice anybody to him was the most terrible and biggest misfortune. To him it caused him great pain. But at the same time, he was able to be excited about performing the will of God when he had to sacrifice his very own son. This idea of sacrificing his own son normally, of course, would be considered to him extremely distressing. But if God asked him specifically and directly to do it, he was more than excited to do it. That was God's will. How things would work out, that was up to God. That would be the primary virtue of a forefather who could, at the same, even though his nature was to be a man of chesed, of kindness, who could not see others in pain, when Hashem told him to do a extremely vulgar act to his very own son, he was more than willing, even excited to do it. At the end of the Parsha, or where the Parsha speaks about Akedas Yitzchak, it talks about the binding of Isaac. There's an interesting verse. As Avram and Yitzchak are traveling to the place where God told Abraham to sacrifice Yitzchak, Yitzchak asks his father, I see the wood and the fire, but where is the animal to be sacrificed? Because Avram was walking with the wood that was going to be burnt with the sacrifice, and he was walking with the fire also. Now, it seems extremely strange if you think about it. Why in the world would have Avraham carried from his house all the way to the place where the sacrifice occurred wood and fire? Why did he have that with him? Was he was lugging for his entire trip from his tent all the way to the place where they were going to sacrifice Yitzchak, Isaac, with the fire and the wood? That's the question for this week's Parsha. Why did Avram take the fire and the wood with him? Why didn't he just find fire and wood wherever he went to sacrifice Yitzchak? Have a good Shabbos.